Your finances reek as strongly as the putrid detritus you leave to pile up on your streets. And as that rubbish climbs up sky high on busy street corners and motorists are plunged into deepening potholes in the Gauteng metros of Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni, residents see the crumbling state of governance around them. The Auditor General, Bongani Bingwa, whom we spoke to just days ago, says if you live in these two metros, you should hardly be surprised. Weak institutions will always struggle to protect public resources, she says. And even some of these municipalities, when they do complete projects, it is found sometimes they serve no purpose. Because you see, the people making the decisions are woefully out of their depth, and it's obvious in the disastrous state many of our municipalities around the country find themselves in. Somebody who keeps an eye on these things just as much is the managing director at Municipal IQ, Allan, who joins us now. Kevin, thank you so much for your time and welcome to 702 Breakfast.
Good morning, Bongani, and to your listeners. Great to be with you.
I said in my introduction, you also keep an eye on these things. I would bet you are hardly surprised by what the AG has to say.
Well, I'm not surprised, but I was hopeful, as we all must be. But yeah, it was a disappointing set of results again this year from the AG's office, I must say.
Are things getting worse?
They are getting worse, actually. So, Bongani, you know, the gold standard for municipalities is to receive an unqualified audit with no findings. We down three cycles ago, financial cycles. We had 41 who were able to achieve that accolade. That was down in the previous cycle to 38, and in this cycle, the results have just come out, down to 34. So, you know, that higher standard is just going down every year, which is really disappointing and quite worrying.
This is out of over 200, am I correct?
So we have 257 municipalities, and right now, 34 were able to achieve an unqualified audit with no findings, and that is really only quite pathetic, 13%.
That's extraordinary. And of course, if you live in Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni, you'll know full well what that's all about.
Yes, absolutely. So Ekurhuleni, a couple of years ago, 3 financial cycles ago, was able to get an unqualified audit, and it was a great thing. But in the last 2 years, it hasn't managed to get that. And Joburg, in the last 2 years, Joburg was only able to scrape together the results it got last year, which was an unqualified with findings. So it wasn't able to get that top accolade. And only one metro in the country, in fact, was able to get an unqualified audit this year, and it won't be a surprise to anyone who's watching these things. It was Cape Town, and you know, the big Gauteng metros didn't do very well at all.
So, do we just sit here in Joburg and be envious of Cape Town? Are we stuck with this incompetence, this failure? Is that it? You get what you vote for?
I can hear your frustration, and I agree with you completely, because I'm also a resident of this great city, and I don't know. It is really frustrating, because you will see that in Joburg we've had problem after problem with the coalition that has been running things here, and quite frankly, for me, there's a very clear link between low performance in Joburg as well as other Gauteng-based metros, Tshwane and Ekurhuleni, and the coalition governments that we've all endured up here in Gauteng.
And of course, I mean, the fish rots from the head, right? She also talks about how if the big metros like Joburg and Ekurhuleni are this bad, that sets a bad example for the smaller ones around the country.
Yeah, exactly. Look, it's endemic. I mean, that for me is the point. It's the most important thing is that it's endemic. Is you know, if you look across the spectrum, so we have 3 types of municipalities: metros, districts, and locals, and they are all equally poor. You know, you definitely would expect metros to do better than your locals or districts, because metros are enormous. They have multi-billion rand budgets, and they have enormous amounts of capacity. They have, you have many, many people looking after financial management. You have big financial management departments. You have very supposedly qualified, experienced people in charge of things like auditing and financial management in a metro like Joburg. So it mystifies me, honestly, to think that our big metros, with all this money and all this access to capacity and experience, are still not able to get this very basic thing right.
I mean, Kevin, there seems to be little incentive to stop the rot. We know many of these officials and politicians who dish out tenders do so to people they are connected to, and everyone rakes in millions. They live in the lap of luxury, and their parties across the board turn a blind eye because everybody has skeletons in their closet.
Yeah, I agree completely. One of the things that the AG points out, and I must say, just on the side, the AG's report is always a beacon of truth every year. She doesn't pull her punches and, speaks truth to power every time she publishes this report. And it's really commendable. It's one of the rare examples in government where we have an agency really putting something like this together. But what she says in her call to action in regard to auditing is that there's a culture of no accountability and consequences, to your point there. And this is absolutely right. And at Municipal IQ, where we monitor performance of municipalities across the country all the time, this is what we see time and time again, is that there's no accountability and there's no consequences, which is why you have a situation where you have unqualified audits going from 41 to dropping to 38, dropping to 34 over the last 3 financial years. That's why you have that situation, quite frankly, because there is a culture of no accountability and consequences.
So again, Kevin, I've got to come in and say what is to be done. I mean, I have enormous respect for Tsakani Maluleke as the current Auditor General, as did I for her predecessor, Kimi Makwetu. We've heard the same kind of thing year in, year out. It's almost as if the politicians don't think it matters.
Well, or that politicians don't care, possibly. And
exactly.
Yes, I agree. I agree with you. Until we actually have, so she identifies, apart from this culture of no accountability, she also says that there's inadequate skills and capacity and that there's governance failures. Now, that is all basically, for me, this issue of accountability. Now, until you actually take seriously that there's a dearth of decent capacity in municipalities, and this is just one reflection of it.
So do we need to redesign the whole thing? Because if we're talking about a dearth of skills, what we end up doing is we hire several people to do the same job because different consultants are hired, and when those officials have to explain the decisions, right, they can't explain it. They don't know what's going on. The consultants, of course, rake in millions, and the municipality, instead of delivering services to people, ends up paying to people to do the same job, and those that are left to account don't even understand what decisions were arrived at. Do we need to redesign local government entirely?
Well, let me also just add to that and say that she was scathing, the Auditor General was scathing about the role of consultants and said in many cases they didn't actually have any positive impact. So for all those millions that were spent, do we need to redesign the system? I don't think so, because we actually have ironically, a really well-designed local government system. And quite frankly, Bongani, if you were to redesign it and you still had no accountability, then you would just have another system which people didn't feel accountable for. What we need to do is enforce accountability. I mean, that's the bottom line. And the way we do that is through other spheres of government. Provincial government has a direct role in receiving reports from municipalities within their province. They are directly accountable to say, okay, you need to do X by X date, and I need to have a look at it then and see if it's good enough. Now, that is not really happening very well. So provincial government has to have a role, and national governments as well. And until other spheres of government really take their role seriously in getting municipalities to account, then very little will change.
Yeah.
And
But the politics of it all often interfere. The reason province doesn't get involved is because these metros are run by their pals from the same party. And depending on where one is within the party structures, those things often come into it. I mean, I'll ask you one final question, Kevin. I turned 50 this weekend, and I don't know how old you are, but I'm old enough to remember Johannesburg in its heyday. Look at our city. Is it a lost cause?
It's not a lost cause, Bongani, because I'm a proud South African and I would never say that. Congratulations on turning 50. I'm older than you. But no, I think I remain hopeful. And you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the biggest problems is, in fact, maybe the key problem is the politics. You know, you'll have the chairman of the ANC is now running Joburg. He's the mayor, which is appropriate because he's a powerful person. But, you know, you will have someone possibly lower down the ranks in the ANC, possibly not in Joburg, but in other places, who then must report in administratively in terms of their role in local government to that person, you know. So you have a mismatch in party and administrative responsibilities or authority, and that will never work. You can't have a junior ranker in the ANC at the provincial level, receiving a report from a big stuff at the local level. You know, the big stuff is just going to say, well, I don't care what you think.
Yeah, I'll deal with you at the branch. I'll deal with you at the branch meeting.
Yeah.
It's just
so
extraordinary.
Ultimately, the politicians, that is the other part of accountability. And we have to really get home to politicians that they have a big responsibility as well to ensure that at party level, good people are put forward for positions in local government.
Yeah.
And, ultimately that is a big part of what will make it work then.
Kevin Allan is the managing director at Municipal IQ. I'll put to you the question I put to him. What is to be done? Do we wring our hands? That's it? Are we stuck with this? What is to be done? Do we just sit there envious of Cape Town? Is that it? You get what you vote for? Your thoughts?
Current events, developing stories,
tough questions.
Your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.